I guess where to start would be, how old are you now, Daniel?
I'm 36.
And last year you had an experience where you basically almost died or came very close to death.
That was in 2004.
2004.
So it's...
You were describing to me that what happened was that you ended up having an experience where you felt that your higher self was speaking to you. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
It was at a time when I'd been suffering from quite chronic depression through health problems that were getting progressively worse. And I had made the commitment to end my life. I'd had enough. Nothing made any sense. There was so much pain in the world and so much pain in my body. I was incredibly tired all of the time. And I just wanted to go home. I didn't really understand why I was here, and I didn't understand. It just didn't seem fair. There was so much unfairness, and it wasn't a cry for help because that had happened many, many years before, and I'd sought so many people out to help me, both physiologically, psychologically, and spiritually. I had a sense of, my father had died 3 years before, and my sister's boyfriend had been killed. I always say killed and then died sometimes because it took 3 days for him to die, but it was in an accident that wasn't his fault. And I was there when he passed, and I had a spiritual experience of when he passed, and I felt his body, I felt him leave his body and drift to the ceiling. There was a piece, the fact that he'd gone, and I'd spent about 3 evenings there at the hospital in the middle of the night in intensive care with him. And my health wasn't good at the time, but it was I was still doing what I needed to do with him. But my health had got progressively worse the following year, and I ended up being in hospital for a month, and with writer's syndrome. I had iritis and arthritis, as well as ME and fibromyalgia and dozens of other problems. So I just felt I wanted to go home, and it was I'd saved up sleeping tablets, and I took those in November 2004, and I wrote. I took them with alcohol, and I wrote. It was the only way to sort of take my mind off what I'd done, and it was a clear indication to me that this is it. I'm going to do it, and this is my suicide note. Yeah. And I was half an hour. You'd never know really because I was very under the influence, but I would have said 20 minutes to half an hour, having taken what I'd taken. And for the first time in a long, long time, there was that part of me that really wanted to live, but it was much more. It was a higher self part. And the reason I say higher self was because it spoke with such authority. Other people would probably say this is the word of God, or...
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, it sounds even more than your higher self, maybe.
It was just an absolute authoritative voice that said, you haven't tried everything yet. And I remember thinking, well, I have, but I have tried everything yet. So it was, you could just say it was another part of me, or a higher self, God, whatever you want to call it, but a higher intelligence. And so I stuck my fingers down my throat, and there were no pills coming out. And I specifically remember that and thinking, oh, they've all diluted now. But I was very, very in a very inebriated state, and 15 sleeping tablets are not, they're going to start having an effect on you. But I can still remember that voice, even though I was in such a drunk and inebriated state. And it's never really left me, that voice. It's still, I'm not always in contact with it. But when I need to, I can go to it, and I realise that it's there. But what happened was that I just went straight to bed, and it was on a Monday night at about 8 or 9 o'clock. And then I woke up the next day at 5 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday.
Wow.
So
this voice that you came in contact with, had you ever been in contact with it before?
No. No, not in that capacity. I think I'd had little moments of when I was when I was 12 years old, I had an experience when I was on holiday and I was walking down some cliffs, and I felt I was talking with God, of whatever God was. I was brought up very sort of Anglican Christian, so I had this idea of God talking to me, and I had this conversation with God, and I got almost a vision of my future, of what I would be doing and what I was here for, and I felt very, very different. And I didn't really believe in organised religion, and it kind of like had a sense of that was not quite right.
Yeah.
What was I going to be doing in life? It was almost communicated to me. And I remember sort of like seeing myself talking to people and helping others. And what I was shown was a life that I couldn't really describe, because I certainly wasn't a priest and or a vicar, or and I didn't look as if I belonged to any kind of religion. And I just knew that there was a sense of that I had purpose and that this is what I would be doing.
So you've actually had quite a few spiritual experiences in your life then, from the passing of your friend as well. What did you feel then?
When Ashley died, I'd spent 3 evenings with him throughout the night. I'd worked in the day as my sister's boyfriend, and he'd been in this car accident. A lady just came out of a T-junction thinking it was a crossroads and ploughed straight into his driver's door at 40 miles an hour. And he had chronic head injuries, and if he did recover, if he did live, he would have been very, very severely affected. And he was a very young, able and very sensitive young man, lovely guy. He was only 19, and ironically, he'd watched my dad pass 14 months before, as he'd been on watch when my father had died. So I was studying counselling at the time, so I'd sort of counselled him and sort of spiritually counselled him throughout that last year, and he said how affected he was by it, because he'd seen my father take this last breath, and he'd actually gone up to him to tell him the football scores, even though my dad was in this coma for the last 3 days because he was dying of terminal lung cancer for having smoked all of his life. But so Ashley had this experience. It wasn't a spiritual experience for him, but he was quite traumatized by the fact that this man who he loved, he did love my dad, and who'd become somewhat of a father figure to him, had died. So that there were links there, and then it was nearly 14 months to the day later. That he has this terrible car accident, and I was the first one to the hospital to see my sister and him, because when I was told they'd been in an accident, I just dropped everything and I just went to the hospital, whereas other members of my family were like, oh, they'll be all right, and I don't know whether it was an intuition, but I just went. And so I spent time with Ashley when he was in intensive care in the evenings, and I did a lot of Reiki on him, where I just felt it was, I say Reiki, I just did what was intuitive to me, just felt what I did, what felt right, and so I was connecting on a different level. And so that was on the Sunday evening, the accident, and he passed away on the Thursday lunchtime, so there'd been quite a bit of time, and I think during that time he was working out whether he wanted to stay or not, and he chose to go. So there was actually a piece at that moment of when he decided to go, because it was, well, I think that's actually the best idea, and I felt a peace there. So when we all went in, or certain members of the family went into intensive care when he passed.
There was a peace. Did he express he felt peaceful?
It's one of those things where I can't even.
You're not fighting it, or you could see he was relaxing.
No, he was. His body was failing, and he'd restarted his heart, and I think a number of his organs had started to stop functioning. I just sensed it. I just sensed it. So it was much. I felt there was a
transition or something.
Yeah, I felt that was going on, and possibly I felt that because I was doing lots of Reiki, and I was or just placing my hands on him and just doing healing and just connecting on that level. Felt a sense of he's ready to go now, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. And
so from what I can tell, you had an experience when you were 12, and then you had your father die, and then you also had Ashley die. So you've actually been close to spiritual, or I don't know, say deathly experiences, but more expanded dimensional experiences quite a few times. So it's not just been a one-off, and then you have your own experience.
You then have my own experience, yeah.
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 So what I'm wondering is, did you start to see changes within yourself as far as your belief structure when Ashley died, or would you contribute it more to when you yourself probably almost died?
All of it's accumulative. The most impactful one probably is the last one, is my own experience, to know that regardless of what was happening within my body and my health, that there was another way of looking at the world, or there was something else. There was an intelligence governing all of this, and there was a reason and a meaning behind all of it.